Welcome to Genomics Gupshup. Genomics Gupshup is an initiative by MapmyGenome to create a community around genomics and to simplify genomics for everyone. And we do this by bringing together experts from allied areas like longevity, health and wellness, gut health, pharmacogenomics, nutrition, fitness, microbiome research, and much more. Please join us as we spread the word about this exciting science of genomics. We are now on any of your favorite podcasts. Just search for Genomics Gupshup on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or Google Podcast. Today is a special episode, and that's why we are really excited that we are honored to welcome Dr. Brett Finlay, who is a world-renowned microbiologist and professor at the University of British Columbia. He is the UBC Peter Wall Distinguished Professor, a professor at the Michael Smith Laboratories, and he's also the co-director and senior fellow at CIFAR. And he has done many things on Salmonella, E. coli, and various other things. But besides pathogens, I've heard he does a lot of very interesting things. And we are very excited that he's also now part of our scientific advisory board as well. He has written many books. And I think there is the one that is extremely well known, which is called Let Them Eat Dirt. If you haven't read it, you must. And he's also written another book called The Whole Body Microbiome, and his latest book called The Microbiome Master Key. I'm delighted that I was able to get signed copies of all of these. So thank you so much, and welcome to the show, Dr. Brett Finlay.
Super pleasure to be here. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. So I know you've probably heard this many times before, but today you are like the most well-known person on microbiome. But how did you get excited when you were a child to get into this field? What inspired you to get there, and how did you get there?
Well, like most careers, it's a long, sordid story, but basically, my parents were both biologists. My dad was a zoologist. My mother was a botanist. So I grew up looking at the birds and the flowers kind of thing. And I knew I wanted to be a scientist. So actually in junior high school and stuff, I thought I wanted to be an archaeologist because dinosaurs were cool, right? So I was digging bones at the university and everything. But biology is my true love. And going to university, I really like biology and really like chemistry. So I went to see, well, if I took biology, I said, where's the chemistry courses? I took chemistry. Where's the biology courses? So I found this thing called biochemistry. I didn't really know what it was. I signed up for it. And then I continued that pursuit. And then where I got really into microbiology is I was looking for labs to go to graduate school, and our neighbor was a neurosurgeon, and I was supposed to do some strange things on squid axons and things like this. And my biochemistry prof, who happened to also be a microbiologist, says, oh, no, that's not real science. Come work with me. We do real science. And he works on microbes. And so I did my PhD on these things called pili, which are these hair-like structures that stick out of bacteria and allow them to attach and mate and things like that. And so I've been hooked on microbiology ever since then and spent my whole life doing it.
Yeah, I remember I was reading one of your, I think, books or somewhere else, but you've been doing a lot of work on diarrhea, and then I think you also mentioned that in many of your talks, right? So I know it's not the most pleasant until you've had it, and then you realize how important that is. So,
well, I have a joke saying that diarrhea is our bread and butter, because I've worked most of my career on Salmonella and E. coli, and both these things do cause diarrhea, and it's been a very interesting journey in trying to figure out how they all do it and things like this.
And then from there to microbiome is relatively new, right? So how did
so I spent most of my career studying Salmonella and E. coli, and actually we had a lab retreat, and one of the things I like to do at the lab retreat is get casual and sit around a bonfire and drink whiskey or something and just brainstorm, right? And we've been studying diarrheal microbes, so E. coli and Salmonella, we know live in the gut. And we started to think, well, what about all those other microbes that are in the gut? We called them normal flora back then. We now call it the microbiome. And we had no clue that when you got cholera, the only microbe you could see coming out in the feces was Vibrio cholerae. It was basically a monoculture of this. But in Salmonella, E. coli, diarrhea and stuff, we had no clue what these other bugs did. And also, that was about the time when the technology was just starting where you could actually sequence these microbes, because you can't grow them. Early days of sequencing. So we sort of started to set out on the journey of, well, what happens to all these other bugs when you get diarrhea? And that was when we started getting a microbiome. And then we just exploded into asthma and Parkinson's and malnutrition, all sorts of different areas based on the microbiome.
That's amazing. I think everybody talks, but knows not as much, I think, but at least people know the term microbiome. And everybody knows there's good bacteria and there is bad bacteria. But do we know better about the bad bacteria, or do we know better about the good bacteria? And is it well classified, or you think we still a little bit far away from understanding what good means? And is it the diversity?
Yeah, tricky question. And it's kind of like people, a good person can do bad things sometimes, depending on the place, and vice versa. And so normal, harmless E. coli on a plate, if you inject it into the body, it can cause sepsis and kill you. Is that a bad bacteria? So good and bad's tough. And we're pretty good at determining whether you have bad bacteria as an overall composition in your body. And we're good at that. Where we actually struggle is what is a good composition of microbes? What makes this good? And so we know when it's bad, and we kind of say, well, if it's not bad, it must be good, but we're not sure about that. So there's still lots to be discovered. We're certainly understanding a lot more, but we don't have all the answers yet.
But do you think we'll get there soon enough, or at least?
Yes, but I also think you have to realize it's going to be confusing because every person in the world has a different set of microbes. You and I are different, and you're different than the person you're married to, for example. And there is no one microbe that everyone has. And I think part of the problem is that we are looking at microbial composition. We're not looking at what they do. So if you believe the idea that in biology important things are conserved, then we should all have the same microbes, right? Because they're important as far as we're concerned, but we don't. So I think you have to go beyond that and say, okay, what are these microbes doing? They're breaking things down. They're making molecules and things like this. And so instead of looking at the microbes, we should actually be looking at, what molecules they're making. And it doesn't matter which microbe makes that molecule, as long as that molecule is made. And so I think as we start to get beyond the microbes and into more what they do, we will get a better understanding of what kind of composition you need. And, two ecosystems will both be healthy, but they can be very different. And I think that's what we're seeing here. As long as you've got the carbon fixers and the prey and all these things, and that's the same. It's really an ecosystem, and so we have to figure out what makes a good ecosystem, and it'll be different for everyone.
So much like a startup ecosystem, right? You need all kinds of players. You need the people who do the innovation. You need the people who fund the innovation, and so on.
Totally. And I think that the problem is that this field is dominated by microbiologists. And microbiologists grew up identifying pure single isolates of a single microbe on a plate. And we don't want to have it complicated by having more than one there. Yet you're right, the gut and all other microbiomes in our body are really an ecosystem, and there's many bacteria there, and they talk to each other, they help each other, they hinder each other. And we have to start thinking ecosystems, which microbiologists traditionally have not. We think about single microbes. And so you got to get your brain beyond that and think of this collection of microbes working together. And once we start to understand that, I think we'll actually make better progress than we are now.
So you mentioned that the two microbes that you studied the most was Salmonella and E. coli. And let me add in H. pylori in there as well, just for
Sure.
So how do these microbes actually cause disease? Because you said if you just put E. coli on a plate, it wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah.
How do they cause disease?
Well, first of all, when we say E. coli, many different things can come to mind. There's the E. coli we use in the lab that we clone into. It's harmless. There's an even E. coli Nisal, which is a probiotic that's good for you. And there's at least 5 different kinds of E. coli that cause different diarrheas. And in North America, we have something called E. coli 0157, which also causes kidney disease and stuff. And so these different E. colis cause different diarrheas, believe it or not. And so we've been studying some of these, and really both salmon and E. coli, the moral of the story is these bugs have to figure out how to get into a very crowded environment where there's lots of microbes already. So they have to outcompete all these other microbes who are already there, chewing away happily on what you eat and things, boot those ones out, and then they got to figure out how to set up an infection. And what we've learned over the years, these microbes are really good at tweaking the human body to make it better for their infection. They do things like they turn down our immune system, so our immune system can't fight them off. In the case of Salmonella, it's actually able to crawl inside cells, macrophages and things that live inside as an intracellular organism. And that makes it very hard for the body to get at it. And the ways we found these things do this is they actually have these, we call them secretion systems, which are kind of like these syringes where the bacteria pulls up to a host cell and actually injects molecules in that reprogram many aspects of that cell so it can then do its thing on it. And that's probably the biggest progress we made in the last few years, is really understanding what all these molecules are, what gets injected, what does it do to the cell, and then collectively, how does that actually all contribute to the actual diarrhea that we see as the end product from it. So yeah, that's been a 30-year chunk of my life, I think, figuring all this out, but we made great progress, and I think we now understand much better how these things actually work.
And do you see that it makes a big difference when, let's say, people who were malnourished when they were, as children, or people who are obese, or people who, maybe with the same combinations, but it doesn't seem to affect them as much as it affects other people? What happens? Is it because it clearly is not just those, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, if you go to a wedding and everyone eats the same contaminated, I don't know, potato salad or something, how come out of 100 people, 30 people get sick and 70 don't? What's behind that? And a lot of that has to do with the status of the host, the person itself. As you say, healthy people are generally more robust at fending off infections. If you're immunocompromised, meaning your immune system is not so good, you have more trouble fighting these things off. And things like obesity that contributes to your disease susceptibility. So yeah, that plays a part of it. Now, some of these are really good pathogens, and it really doesn't matter who you put them in, they're going to cause disease, especially some virus pathogens like Ebola or something like that. Doesn't matter how healthy you are going to die if you get it, kind of thing. But in these diarrheal diseases, a lot depends, and really it's a battle, and sometimes it works in favor of the pathogen, you get disease, sometimes it works in favor of you, and you feel just fine, even though you ate the potato salad, kind of thing. And so it's biology in action, and these two forces are playing each other, and sometimes one wins out, sometimes the other. And then we see when the bad guys win, because then we have diarrhea or something, right?
Yeah. So I've seen that now a lot of college-going students, especially when they move from one continent to the other. For instance, my daughter, but I've also heard this from many, many parents, right? That the moment they move from one microbial ecosystem to another, they are not in such a great shape to fight off the same things that maybe somebody who is probably better used to. So what happens when you move from one country to the other? Is there some problem that is happening with their gut, or why do they suddenly get exposed to?
Well, for one thing, you see sort of a new collection of organisms. I mean, if you're born and raised in India, you actually get pretty good at fighting off the India pathogens, for example. You move to Vancouver, Canada, suddenly you're not quite so used to the Vancouver bugs kind of thing. And so there's the pathogens, your immune system and things, but then there's also, as you say, your microbiome. And microbiomes change very quickly when you move to a different place. We know that. And I think it's as the microbiomes are adapting and they're changing that puts you more at risk for infection. And you'll also hear stories of people where they were, I don't know, pretend they were a kid in India, they moved to Canada, the States, for example, spent their adulthood back. They go back, they now get infections that they previously didn't get before, and sort of going home kind of thing, and they're not prepared to fight off the things that they used to be able to fight off. And that's because their immune system and their bugs haven't seen these diseases in 40 years or whatever, and they're more susceptible to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So clearly there is no one concept then of what is good for you and what is bad for you, right? Which I think a lot of people, especially if you see on the internet, there is, some people who are telling you to eat X or Y, or something is great for you, something is not. What should people do? I mean, obviously there are things that are generally healthy, but I think people are not necessarily, just by eating one particular,
right,
a probiotic or a particular food, that's not going to solve all your health problems, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to stress. There is one no good magic bug that if you take this, probiotic, whatever, or even magic food, it's going to fix everything. That's just wrong. And as we said before, these are ecosystems we're dealing with. There are many things you can do to actually improve your microbes, and we actually discuss a lot of these in our book in a lot more detail. And simple things such as, improving your diet. Generally speaking, diets that favor a lot of fruits, nuts, vegetables, less red meat, less white sugar, less white flour, all the stuff that we eat in North America so much. And basically things like the Mediterranean diet, which I'm sure most people have heard of, these are really good for your microbes. And ironically, that's why it's then good for you, because these microbes are able to chew on all these fibers and things that we don't normally digest, and then turn these fibers into beneficial things that dampen the inflammation, the inflammatory responses in the gut, and they basically improve the health of the host. So, I mean, diet is a great way. Exercise is a really good way. Exercise really improves your microbes, which then improves you. Getting a good night's sleep is important. And ironically, a good diet really does help a good night's sleep. There's lots of data now showing that. Decreasing stress in your life is a really good way of improving your microbes. And the other way is to have a healthy community around you, both friends and family, and be exposed. And I often think in elder care places, they should allow dogs and young kids to defecate all over this place and get those young microbes in there, because these poor old people, you're not allowed to see them. You got to wash your hands. All they see is old microbes, and I think we should be inoculating them with these nice new ones. Let them play with their grandkids. Let them get licked by dogs. This is actually good, and so that's another way of replenishing your microbes.
Yeah, I think I often tell people that back in India, we had 4 generations and multiple dogs staying in the same house, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that, while some people might not appreciate it, I think I truly like the fact, and now I know that, it's also good for you from a health perspective, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing we fight is that historically we've been really worried about infectious diseases. And if you go back 100 years, that's what most people died of. Yet today we don't die of infectious disease very much at all. And so we call this the hygiene hypothesis. We've just been living too clean in our quest to sanitize everything, clean up everything, get rid of all these infectious agents. That's really worked for infectious diseases. As I say, people don't die of those anymore. But on the other hand, we've gotten rid of all the microbes and we're losing all the good ones. And so the thought is that in our quest to clean up this world, we cleaned up all the other healthy microbes too, and actually made ours more unhealthy. And there's a lot of evidence to say that actually contributes to our current problems of health in the world today, what we call the non-communicable diseases, diabetes, obesity, Alzheimer's, dementia, IBD, for example. And these are all now being associated with the lack of good bugs and the increase of bad bugs, which seem to contribute to these diseases. And we previously didn't think that microbes had anything to do with these things, but we now know they do.
So you can maybe get rid of some things, but not everything, by being super clean. And I think maybe I was exposed to a lot of, my parents allowed me to play in the mud and dirt.
Oh, you're lucky.
And I don't get that many infections, right? So
yeah, I mean, I think COVID is another good example. So we were actually starting to convince people, it's okay to hang out with your microbes and get a little dirty and let them eat dirt, as I say in the book, kind of thing. But then COVID came along, and you remember the days of COVID where you couldn't even see anyone else. You would cough into your sleeve, you would wash your hands, you would stay squirreled up in your home, for example. And that was back to the hygiene, the hyper hygiene, worried about infections. And that too had a big effect on the microbiome of people, especially young kids and the elderly, in that they were not being exposed to the microbes they normally would. So that was a real shift back. And now I think as we're coming out of COVID, people are starting to maybe embrace the world a little more again, although they're still a little leery. And the idea that there's lots of microbes out there, and only a few actually will hurt you. Most are either beneficial or have no effect on us.
You did a few studies on COVID and microbiome, right? So was there something done on children born during that time, or?
Yeah, and we did a study, and we predicted these kids, these COVID babies, would be really screwed up for the microbes. They're living in these clean environments. They can never contact their neighbors. They can't go outside to play. We thought they'd be really hurting. Ironically, we're wrong. They actually did okay because what meant staying at home meant they were being breastfed the whole time. And so they weren't going to daycare and getting all the infections that young kids did. So we got that one wrong. Ironically, staying home and breastfeeding these kids was actually good for them. There's also some really neat studies come out on COVID now that you can predict the severity of the COVID disease that people get based on their microbiome composition. And especially long COVID, there's some really strong microbial signatures associated with long COVID. And that makes sense because long COVID is an inflammatory type disease and some microbes involved in the inflammation. And so, depending on your microbial composition, that actually will affect what level of COVID disease you actually get.
So do you think that since when we were discussing a good microbiome or good things to do, one of the things you mentioned was stress, right? And during COVID, I think a lot of teenagers who were in classrooms at that time, let's say they were in their high school or middle school, or even maybe early school years or whatever, they did not get a chance to meet people or have those social connections. Do you think they might go into have some issue later on in life?
Potentially. I mean, proving it's difficult. But, when you miss your high school graduation, you can't see your friends. That's very stressful for a teenager, without a doubt. Living on a computer the entire time. And heck, I mean, high school's all about kissing, right? You're not going to swap microbes that way anymore. You can't do it through an internet program kind of thing. Correlating it is difficult, but we do know that increased levels of stress really push your microbes more towards a bad inflammatory type composition, which then has bad effects on you. And anyone who's been stressed know they're not as healthy as when they're not stressed. And so that would have pushed them there. I haven't seen any data to say that it's actually increased disease in those teenagers yet, but it wouldn't surprise me.
So we talked a lot about good by microbes. Most of the time we're talking about bacteria, right? Do we also have good viruses and good any other form of pathogens that, not pathogens, but microbes or of any kind?
Good question. Yes. Yeah. No. So, and we should clarify, we have been talking about bacteria, and when we talk about microbiome, by definition, that means all the bacteria, but also means all the viruses and the fungi and the single-celled organisms. Basically, every microscopic creature that lives in and on us is called the microbiome. Now, the reason we talk so much about bacteria is that the bacteria, we've been able to figure out ways to easily sequence them and identify them through sequencing. Even if you can't grow them, you can sequence them and you can say that here's your bacterial composition. Viruses don't have those handy handles, so we actually really struggle to figure out how many viruses there are in our microbiome and what are good and what are bad. And there's two kinds of viruses, those that live in mammalian cells and those that live in bacterial cells. And so there's both those sets of viruses there. And we actually know very little about the viruses. We know a little bit about the fungi. There's not too many fungi in us, but there's a few. But they're like bacteria, pretty easy to sequence and figure out. So it's coming on pretty quickly about that. But we call it the virome, which is all the viruses live in. We really don't know much about that. And many times viruses are quite good at just hanging out. We call this latent. They're basically able to just incorporate their DNA into either your DNA or bacteria inside your DNA and just hang there. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly, if you're stressed or whatever, they pop out again and they become viruses, but they're just sort of hanging out, not doing anything. And it's not good or bad. They're just there. And that's a normal part of biology too, how viruses live. So we don't know a lot about viruses yet. And I don't know examples of a really healthy virus. I know examples of viruses don't really do much, or those that then cause disease. But I actually can't, that's a great question. Can't think of a virus that is good for you that you should have. It's a good question.
I read about some that prevent you from certain diseases because it killed others.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I think it is, obviously the viruses, the fungi, and all of that. And I think at Microbiome Insights, a company that you have founded, I found really interesting kinds of studies, right? Which one of those is the most exciting for you? I think you've been studying microbiome. For me, everything is exciting. When they told me about the blue whale, they told about insects. I got all super excited, but which one is your most funkiest, interesting study that is?
Yeah, so Microbiome Insights, it was actually founded because everyone kept coming to me and say, "Hey, will you sequence the microbiome in our particular experiments?" And I sort of said, "Well, let's make a company that does this for a living," and that's what Microbiome Insights does, and does very well. And so, there's been many investigators that will do an experiment. They're not microbiome experts, so they just send samples off, and then they get sequenced. They get back these reports, and they know their microbiome. I mean, so they've been involved in many, many studies. I think one of the more fun ones involved in is the skin microbiome. So that we have microbes living on our skin, that's normal. And your left hand skin microbes are very different than your right hand microbes because they do different. One's on the cell phone, one's scratching your head or whatever. So they have different microbiomes. But they were looking, it was actually a cosmetic company, Amway. They were looking at the effects of potentially, different cosmetic things you can put on your skin to change your microbiome, or can change your microbiome make your skin healthier. I mean, that was the ultimate goal, like, because you don't want wrinkles and, poor looking skin and things. So that was very fun. And then also we learned that, changing your diet will actually affect your skin microbiome. Like eating a Mediterranean diet will actually enhance the microbes on your skin and make your skin healthier, even though it's something you're eating that's going into your gut. So that's one of the many studies. And there's been lots of interesting ones. They did a lot of cool stuff on soil and looking at soil and grapevines. Can you predict what kind of good or bad grapes you're going to get depending on the soil microbes, for example? That's an interesting one there. And so there's been lots of very fun studies. And as you say, it's all very exciting. It really is.
Yeah, I think the recent one, there was something on buildings and the water, and so it's environment, there is the human, there is others, so it's fascinating.
Yeah, we just worked with architects on how could you design a microbiome-friendly building? Because we build these buildings airtight, like no microbe can get in or out. The air is filtered. And we thought, no, how do we design a breathable building that there's dirt in there, for example? I mean, think how we used to live with dirt floors and mud thatches and animal manure everywhere. And how, I'm not sure you get it approved as a hospital built like that. But even studies showing that opening the windows in hospitals, for example, the patients do better because they're then exposed to microbes and things. So we have to get away from this, sanitize everything and embrace these good microbes, realize it's just part of our world. And the more we're part of our world, the better off we are, kind of thing.
So I think when you mentioned the hospital, I remember reading that once people who were next to the sun at the window, they tend to heal faster than the ones who were not exposed, were in like away from sunlight and all that. Is there some microbes you're getting from the sun, or what's going on?
I'm just trying to think of vitamin D or something. Yeah,
they said vitamin D, but they also said it was D in combination with other things. So I don't know.
I don't know any studies proving that. I know there's really interesting studies on your microbiome composition, whether you get sunburnt or not. And what I learned writing this book is the way you test that is you take a person's buttocks, their bum basically, and you've got two, right? So you got a control and experimental one, and then you sunburn one half and the other is your control. And they found that microbes play a big role on whether or not you get sunburnt, for example, the microbes on the skin, which makes sense. So, yeah.
So you've also been involved in a lot of vaccine development, right?
Yes.
So how does the microbiome and the vaccines work? How does that, how do you get to vaccine development from microbiome?
Well, I think it's a very promising area. We haven't come too far yet. So first of all, we have to back up a bit and realize that the microbiome really influences our immune system. So when you're very young, basically what microbes you have determines how your immune system develops. It'll say whether it goes allergic or not. We call it in the field Th1, Th2 kind of thing. And so microbes influence our immune system and our immune responses. Now, when you think about a vaccine, what you're doing is you're putting in like a little piece of a pathogen and you're activating your immune system. So if the microbes affect the immune system and the vaccines are impacted by the immune system, in theory, the microbiome can influence the vaccine and your immune responses. So we had done some studies looking at, wrote some early reviews on can the microbiome be modulated to actually enhance vaccine responses or not. And of course, healthier people with healthier microbiomes have better vaccine responses than those that aren't or immunocompromised because you need the immune system for the vaccine to work. So I think it's a very promising area. I don't think we know yet that, you take these microbes before you go get your flu shot, you'll get a better response or something. We're just not there yet.
But it is an area that hopefully over the next few years we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a vaccine, there's something called an adjuvant, which is something that you add to the vaccine that basically tells your immune system, turn on more and respond to this. And so there's a lot of hope and thought that, that the microbiome composition could be changed so it works as what we call the adjuvant. So then your vaccine response is better.
So let's move on to your books. I mean, I've heard a story that someone said that you are so good at writing a book that you could even write one write some part of it on a flight, right? So
I wrote most of them on planes. It's a good quiet time. Yeah.
You've written 3. It's not an easy task, right? So how?
It isn't. It's a lot of work, but if the subject you like. So the first one is called Let Them Eat Dirt. And this all started when a postdoc in my lab, Claire Arietta, and she had little kids in the lab, and she was very concerned that, they weren't getting the right microbial exposure and everything. And she said, Brett, we should put a little pamphlet out for parents on how to enhance your microbes' health for the kids. And Claire at the time was working on early life microbiome and asthma. We have some very exciting results in that area, that your microbes influence asthma. So we thought about it for a while, and we sort of said, well, maybe we should write a little book. And it got more, maybe we should really write a real book. And I'll never forget the day I was in Scotland on a mini sabbatical, and Claire and I were talking. So says, okay, well, let's write the book. Claire will start at the beginning. I'll start at the back end because I'm good at the bigger picture. She's good at the details, and we'll just work towards the middle. And I will never forget after hanging up, it's okay, now how do I write a book? Because I've never written a book before in my life. So the first thing is went and got a good bottle of whiskey and had a couple of sips and think, okay, now we got to write a book. And what I've always tried to do in writing the books is think, how do you write something so the non-microbiologist can understand this? I mean, I write technical reviews all the time and things, but that's for people that know all the buzzwords. And how do I write this? So Claire and I wrote Let Them Eat Dirt as really a book designed for a pregnant woman that's having their first kid and they want to make life better. And what we realized is that there is no more voracious readers about child health than a pregnant woman who's expecting their first kid. Yeah, they really care about making this world good for that kid and making that kid's life the best they can. So that was Let Them Eat Dirt. It went on to be a bestseller, and it's very fun. We also did a documentary for your listeners. If you ever want to watch it, it's called Let Them Eat Dirt. Just Google it. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's a 1 hour. Basically says what we say in the book, but in a documentary format. And then after I'd written Let Them Eat Dirt, people said, well, I've had my kids. What about me? I'm not getting any younger. How do I do this? And it was actually my daughter, who is a gerontologist. She works on the effect of the built environment aging. We were running together in Hawaii, and we started talking about this. And we thought, maybe we should write a book on microbes and healthy aging. And we call these the bookends of life, early in life and late in life. So we set out to write that book. So I did write that book with my daughter, and she's a prof now at UC Boulder in gerontology. And so basically on that book, I would write all the microbial stuff, and she would write all the other stuff about the social structures and things. And also, I can't tell you how many times she says, Dad, no one's going to understand this. What the heck is a Th17 cell? I have to write a whole cheat sheet for the immune chapter. What does this mean? And she was a great control because she's not a microbiologist. She's a social scientist about how you make something to do that. And so that was a book, and it was kind of how do you enhance aging. That was called The Whole Body Microbiome. And that came out about 6 years ago. And when I wrote this book, I really wanted to fill it with helpful things that you could do based on scientific studies that show this works. So I did not want to get into the hype and things like this. But at that time, there really wasn't that many studies proving these kinds of things. The publisher kept wanting to say, well, can't you say this? Eat this, you'll fix that. I says, no, there's no data for that, so we cannot put it in. And so the latest book, which just came out, The Microbiome Master Key, is really a complete rewrite of that book. And the good thing is we've now done the science, so we can say that eating the Mediterranean diet does improve your immune system. There are beautiful papers in Cell showing this. We actually have the data and all the trials showing these things. So, and I think it's the book I wanted to write the first time I could, and I'm very proud of it, actually, because I think it gets full of helpful hints of what you can and can't do based on the science. We added a whole new chapter on COVID, which is really fascinating. Added a whole new chapter on sleep, because 5 years ago, sleep wasn't such a big thing as it is now. And microbiome plays big roles in sleep. And even added fun stuff like, okay, well, if we're going to send someone to Mars, what's going to happen to their microbiome sitting 2 years in a spaceship kind of thing, being exposed to radiation and stuff. And so, yeah, it's the book I wanted to write. I honestly think I'm probably done now because each book takes about a year of your life out. But it's fun because you learn all sorts of things. Basically, I found I'm going to write a chapter on whatever, and I spend a month just reading everything. And when you know everything, you don't learn anything new. It's time to actually sit down and write that chapter and then take your notes and then turn it in. And then, yeah, so that's the process of writing a book. So each one took about a year. So I get frustrated because I'm on these tenure committees for people in arts and science, in arts, for example, and they write one book every 5 years, and they're doing great. Well, I'm writing one book in a year and running a lab of 20 people and trying to get these grants and everything. What are you guys doing? But it's a different kind of book. But anyway, yes, I'd highly recommend both Let Them Eat Dirt and the Microbiome Master Key if you're interested in this, because I think they're written for people that you do not have to be microbiologists. Yes, there's a lot of microbe names in there, but you can gloss over them. They're not that critical. And go for the concepts of how we live with our microbes and all the beneficial effects they can have in actually improving our lives. And that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I read it and it is really, really well written, both the books. I read two of your books, the recent one and the Let Them Eat Dirt.
Great.
And the documentary is fantastic also. So I think everything is great. And I would strongly suggest to people that, if you are one of those longevity, want to get to that, the land of longevity or wherever, I think reading this book would really help you in getting a good understanding. Not a lot of, it's not about fluff. It's about real things you can do and how it's actually scientifically helping you as well. So I think definitely people should read that book. And I think it is now out, right?
Yep, it's just out. It's on Amazon. Yep, you can buy it anywhere. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think that if you're interested in healthy aging, which I think we all are actually, I mean, living to 100 in a wheelchair in an elder care home where you can't stand up sucks. I mean, you want to live to, I don't know, 90, you could still walk, down to the store and get papers or whatever. So it's all about healthy living. And generally speaking, in terms of aging, about 25% of 25% of our aging is our own genes. But that means 75 to 80% is in the environment, and that's stuff that we can control. So you can control 75 to 80% of things that are going to happen to you, which is huge. And so if you do all these, if you generally eat healthy and exercise and things, on average, you can add about 10 years or a decade of healthy living to a person's life. So instead of, being unable to walk at, 75, you're at least 85 or 90 kind of thing. And I get a kick out of people who say, well, I don't have time to exercise. I just read a fascinating statistic that for every minute you actually exercise, you add 5 minutes to your life. And if you exercise hard, you add 7 to 8 minutes to your life. So you can't tell me you don't have time to exercise because you're making time in your life on average kind of thing. So I thought that was quite interesting.
I like that. I think
I'd never heard that. Yeah.
If you can add, life, you will find time for exercise, or at least find ways of making yourself more active during the day, right? For instance,
climb the stairs instead of the elevator. Yeah, walk down, get the paper. Just, you don't have to be, I'm going to the gym, I'm going to sweat for an hour kind of thing. It's just movement itself is a huge thing in aging. Yeah. Yeah,
I take a lot of calls like right now, standing, right? So at least you can do some little things that will make your life a little bit more. But I've heard, Brett, that you are one of the most active and the most efficient people. So I think a lot of I think Malcolm has talked about that, and he said you're amazing in terms of your physical, stamina and strength. So what are the things you are doing that are, maybe we can try to replicate?
Well, I really try and live by the work hard, play hard attitude. You can't work 24/7. So I have lots of hobbies. And one of my favorite ones these days is backcountry skiing. So that's climbing up 1,000 meters a mountain with skis in the middle of winter on a glacier. And you've got to be in shape to do that. So I do try and exercise every day. I try and exercise my brain every day too. I play in jazz groups and things, so I play musical instruments. I find that's good for the brain, or do Duolingo, learning French and things like this. So you got to exercise the brain, you got to exercise the body, and yeah, I mean, I try and live each day like it's my last, and then when I wake up tomorrow, it's bonus time. We get to do it again. And so I try to pack my days. I really enjoy just doing stuff. I mean, this world is an amazing place. So yeah, but I think, you know, if you eat well, and the other thing is, you eat well and exercise, you feel better. You have more energy to do things than if you don't. And I think that actually helps you do things. And I'm a strong believer in trying new hobbies. My problem is every time I take up a hobby, I have to be a perfectionist at it. And I thought, well, I'll learn saxophone, I'll learn how to play jazz. How hard can that be, right? So I think I'm now at about the 15,000 hour stage of this, but it works. I now play jazz clubs in Vancouver, and people think I'm a sax player, but even though I'm a scientist kind of thing. So, but what I have trouble doing every time I take up a new hobby, I have to dump another one. I'm a master beekeeper. I keep bees and things, and so. But anyways, I just think live life to the fullest. We are so blessed to live a life, and so don't waste it, because there's so many cool things you can do in life.
So did you also study the bee microbiome?
We did. It's fascinating because really there's only 12 microbes. I mean, we have hundreds of microbes in our microbiome. The bees, so think about a bee. It's out crawling all over flowers and pollen. It's out in the world everywhere. It comes back, shares with all its neighbors that have gone elsewhere, and yet they have a very simple microbiome. We're being very puzzled by it, and each microbe seems to have a purpose. And it's kind of like the way I thought microbiomes would be, where you just have a few and each one does its thing and everyone's got the same microbiome. So yeah, I've been involved in several studies on bee microbiome, and it's a whole different world, and it's a very real puzzle why it doesn't have thousands of microbes on it like every other animal does. So yeah, bees are cool. They are an amazing biological species.
Great. Yeah, no, I think not everybody can replicate everything that you do, but I'm doing the Duolingo. I'm on 3 years now. So
well, there you go. Yeah, that's I mean, you got the brain is it's an organ, right? You got to exercise it, just like you do your weights or whatever. You got to do your brain stuff too. I think that's really important. Sudokus or whatever. Just brain health is really important. Exercise it. You don't use it, you lose it. I think that applies to the brain too.
Great. So I have a few rapid fire questions.
Fun. Okay.
Okay. I think I kind of asked this already, but microbiome research still in early days or already mainstream?
It's beyond early days. It's not fully mainstream yet because we don't have mechanisms. So I think we know the microbiome is involved in many things we didn't know before. We're pretty good at identifying who's there. We're starting to get better at what do they do. But what we really lack is why the microbiome, a particular microbiome, is associated with Parkinson's, for example. We don't know the mechanisms yet. So it's coming, and I think the problem we have in our field is we believe everything is involved, the microbiome is involved in everything. We have the joke, well, what's not the microbiome involved in kind of thing. There are things that aren't, but I think that microbiologists working with other developmental biologists, for example, on brain development, we're starting to sort these things out. So it's coming mainstay, and that's just a matter of time as the field matures, because really this field didn't get going till the early 2000s. So it's still a new field in terms of science, and so we're still figuring it all out. And as the pendulum's swinging from the real hype, oh, microbiome's incredible, to actually, well, it's complex, maybe it's not doing anything here, to actually, how is it working? And so yeah, long answer for a quick question.
So if you had to choose, I think these are not really a choice, but anyway, antibiotics or vaccines?
Oh, that's an easy one, vaccines. So you think how they work. So vaccines, they don't do anything to you other than tweak your immune system and they prevent disease. Antibiotics, you're taking these massive antimicrobial compounds. People tend to think, I have an infection, I'll take an antibiotic, it gets rid of the infection. And an infection is caused by one microbe. Yes, the antibiotics kill that, but it carpet bombs all the other microbes. And there's all sorts of studies showing that increased use of antibiotics causes increased rates of obesity, of asthma, many other diseases, IBD, all these things, because you're hurting the normal microbes along with the ones you're trying to kill. So I think antibiotics, they do have a purpose. They will save your life. If you have a big infection and you need an antibiotic, take it. Don't worry about your microbiome at that stage. Live to another day. but don't take antibiotics for, say, an ear infection. We call it otitis media in kids because it's a viral infection. Antibiotics don't work against viruses. So in Europe, they don't even treat it that way, for example. So use antibiotics sparingly, but when they work, use them, and they're an amazing drug.
So only when it's necessary, don't do it.
Only when it's necessary. Yeah. We used to think, take an antibiotic, it can't hurt. We now know it can hurt.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you have antimicrobial resistance, but it can also screw up your microbes. And big effect of antibiotics.
Yeah, I think one good thing that my parents did, and I don't know if homeopathy works or not, but when we were kids, they didn't give us antibiotics. And I don't know, the homeopathy pills seemed sweet and nice, so they were not a bad thing. You feel you're taking something for it, but at least I didn't take antibiotics.
Well, if you do have an infection, you need an antibiotic, do not hesitate to take that antibiotic. Absolutely. Yeah. But if you don't need them, don't do it.
Okay, one health condition most strongly linked to the microbiome in your view? I think many are, but anyone?
Yeah, there's lots. Probably the strongest might be obesity. We can predict who's obese and not based on microbial composition. That's how this whole field got started when a guy called Jeff Gordon in St. Louis, he did fecal transfers of a fat mouse feces into a thin mouse that gained weight, and took a thin mouse feces into fat mouse that lost weight, took heavyweight people feces, put it in mice that gained weight. And so that was done 20 years ago. And so the question is, well, don't we have it all figured out now? Like, can't we just lose weight by changing our microbes? Mm-hmm. And of course, it's way more complex than that. But I think, and obesity obviously leads to type 2 diabetes, which also leads to Alzheimer's. So, I think that's probably the biggest effect. We know that if you go on a healthy diet and, change your microbes, you will lose weight, and all the problems associated with obesity and the other diseases go away.
So one health myth about gut bacteria that you wish people would stop believing?
Oh, that's a hard one. Maybe that fecal transfers you can do at home and do it yourself type transfer. It's all over the web. There's a gazillion YouTubes. They're very funny.
Really?
All it takes is a blender. But if you perforate your gut, you will die. You need to do this in a clinical setting. People sort of think, well, I'll just get my neighbor's feces and we'll just put in a blender and away we go. And I really worry because it needs to be done like whose feces you use. Do they have other viruses we don't know about? It needs to be done in a clinical setting. A lot of people think they can do it yourself. And I'd really like to dispel that myth that use medical help if you're doing a fecal transfer.
I definitely wouldn't attempt it at home. But,
watch the videos, though. They're very funny.
Maybe I should. I haven't watched any of those. But I did see the one where they said, I think, was it Brian Johnson or one of those who said he took his son's blood and then his blood too for his father and all that. Does that work? Or is that the same?
You mean in terms of taking younger person's feces to help you age?
No, this was more about blood.
I know it's blood, but I was translating it then to feces. I think the blood thing's been kind of debunked. They actually did this in mice where they hooked them up so they were sharing blood and stuff. Could you take a younger blood and make some effect? But that said, talking fountain of youth, there's some very interesting studies in mice. If you take, so the bottom line is the mice get older, they have more of this chronic inflammation. We call it inflammaging, and that's bad, and that causes aging. Okay, well, so then they took young mice feces, put it in these older mice, the inflammation went down, and these mice lived longer. And then they took the old mice feces, which causes inflammation, put in the young mice, they had increased inflammation, and they decreased. So the half joke that I'm kind of waiting to see if there's any data or not is, well, I should go get one of these young UBC students that are 20-year-old that are walking around here at my university, and I should do a fecal transfer into me because I'm old now, and will that influence my aging? There's been no studies shown on that. They're probably doing it in Silicon Valley without telling anyone, but so there is potential that, we jokingly say, the microbiome is the next fountain of youth in terms of ways of living longer.
So this is a strange question, but your favorite microbe, E. coli, Salmonella, or something else?
I'd probably have to go to E. coli because Salmonella is one pathogen and it causes, it's typhi and diarrhea, but typhoid fever, diarrhea. But E. coli, like I say, there's the good E. coli, the Neosol strains. There's a lab strain E. coli we use every day for cloning. And then there's at least 5 of these things that cause 5 different kinds of diarrhea. And the ones that we've studied, something called enteropathogenic E. coli, which causes childhood disease, it does the most amazing thing where the bacterium comes down onto the host cell, it injects bacterial proteins in the host cell, and then uprises this great big pedestal on the cell surface, and the bacterium lives on top of that. It doesn't go inside the cell, and it reprograms the cell so it can live up on this throne and then rule over the cell and then cause diarrhea. I mean, it's a very sophisticated, fascinating organism. So I'm going with E. coli.
Amazing. Which discovery has excited you the most in your career?
Oh, I've been blessed with many. I think probably the neatest one is when we're studying E. coli, and how does it attach to intestinal cells? Up until then, all the bacteria attached, they basically hung on to mammalian proteins. So they hang on to intestinal molecules and things, right? We show that this bacterium actually comes up to a cell, it pushes in a bacterial protein into the host cell, and then it has another bacterial protein on the surface of the bug, and the two of these then bind together. So it's kind of like if you're rock climbing, you pound in a piton into the wall and then hang on to it. So it injects its own receptor. And that was completely unprecedented, completely threw the world upside down. And then based on that knowledge, we went on to develop cow vaccines that against these molecules will prevent E. coli 0157 and things based on this knowledge. So it was a really fun example of biology that we just didn't anticipate at all. We didn't believe it at first, but it was true.
That sounds really, really fascinating. Okay, I think you already answered this, but I'll ask you again anyway. Bacteria or viruses, which are trickier to study?
Trickier? Oh, viruses for sure, just because, and they're not self-living. You can't just put a virus on a plate. You have to grow inside cells. I mean, one of the things I was involved in was SARS broke. I led the Canadian SARS coalition to develop a vaccine against SARS and stuff, and learned a lot about viruses then. Viruses are amazing because they're not alive, yet they can actually reprogram a cell to make lots more viruses. And how does this one piece of DNA or RNA do all that? It is interesting. Bacteria, these are living organisms, and they're 4,000 proteins and all these things going on inside there. They're much more complex than viruses, obviously, and harder to study. But I think viruses, we're still just figuring them out.
Okay. The next section is called myths and facts.
Okay.
Babies are born with a completely sterile gut.
That's generally thought to be true. We think the uterus is sterile. You can find microbial DNA signatures in there, but that doesn't mean there's live bacteria in there, just circulating signatures. So I think we still currently believe that babies are born sterilely, and that first big gulp they take of vaginal and fecal microbiome as in the born, that's actually a very important step in the whole developmental process. And let them eat through it. We talk all about this, how that's such an important process to get the microbiome going.
Yeah, you mentioned that that's the best birthday gift you can get. Right?
Yeah, you did read it. Yes, it is. Yeah. Gross but good. Sorry, guys.
So what happens to the C-section babies? Can they find a way to get that?
Well, they have higher rates of asthma. They have very high rates of obesity, about 25-30% kind of thing. So there's a lot of studies going on. Can you do a vaginal swab where you take a swab of the mother's vagina and introduce this into the newborn to decrease it? You can, but we're still waiting for the studies to finish this. They're about 3 years long. We haven't hit the 3-year mark yet, whether it works or not to prevent these diseases. But yes, a C-section baby is at more risk for disease, and its microbes are much more like the towels they wipe the baby off in the hospital room than the mother's vaginal and fecal microbes, which is what they should be for normal development.
Yeah. I think we are seeing a lot more, at least in India, they're planning out babies, so a lot more C-section babies than normal, which is not a
Not good. No.
Okay. A healthy diet is enough to fix the gut dysbiosis.
Yeah, so dysbiosis is basically when you've got bad bacteria and you're trying to fix it. It sure goes a long ways. I think it depends on why you're dysbiotic. If you have, say, I don't know, huge gut inflammation and it's triggering this, no matter how healthy your gut, an IBD, you can't fix it that way. You need to have anti-inflammatory type things. But for the average person, a healthy diet is probably the best thing you can do for your microbiome. Mediterranean mind diets, lots of plant fiber and things. Stay away from processed foods and red meats, and ultra-processed foods are really bad for you. Eat natural, and that's probably the best thing you can do for all your microbiomes.
More antibiotics always means faster recovery.
Yeah, no, I would say that's definitely a myth, and that's not true at all. I mean, if there's an antibiotic that's treated a particular infection and that infection is itself that antibiotic, you need it, take it. But adding more antibiotics, that just adds more damage to the microbiome. Maybe it'll help kill perhaps the infection more, but it'll also cause you long-term damage. So when you take one course of antibiotics, you screw up your microbes a bit, but they kind of come back. If you take 2 courses of antibiotics, you get further away, they come back, but not all the way. And by the time you've had about 3 courses of antibiotics, your microbiome is so screwed it cannot come back to the way it should be. So there's lots of studies showing that taking a lot of antibiotics is not good for you.
Washing hands too often can negatively affect your microbiome.
That's true. I mean, we wash hands a lot, and during COVID even more so. The thing is, your hands are coated in microbes, and those microbes actually keep away all the bad microbes. So it's kind of this protective coating on you. And if you're constantly scrubbing your hands and stuff, you're much more prone to getting infections because you've gotten away all the normal healthy microbes that are kicking all the bad guys away so they can't land, kind of thing. So yeah, that seems to be very true.
Microbiome of two people is almost identical.
No, yeah. As I said, every person's microbiome your microbiome is more closely associated with the person or persons you're living with than your twin brother and sister that might be living across the world. So genetics plays very little role in your microbial composition. The environment, what you're eating, who you're contacting with, who you kiss, who you shake hands with, type thing. That influences microbiome. And as I say, every person has a different microbiome. It's a unique personal signature. It's just basically really a microbial list of where you've been and what you've eaten and who you've touched and things like this. And so every person is different.
Fasting helps in detoxifying the body.
Yeah, I tackle that, the intermittent fasting, the book and things. And when I was researching it, there's some studies showing that, initial fasting really improved the microbiome. I thought, oh, great, this is actually good for you. Then this big study came out that basically blew that out of the water, said that chronic intermediate fasting is not good for you at all. So I would say right now that the data argues that don't do the intermediate fasting. That said, you should, there's lots of nice data that you should have dinner
early.
Don't eat anything till you wake up the next morning. So give your body that fast is actually really important. But, starving yourself for 24 hours or something or 36 hours, that's not good.
Like all those water fasts and
yeah.
7-day fasts and 24, whatever.
Right. I mean, they did a study on Ramadan where, they don't eat for that. And they really found that had a big effect on the microbiome.
But they eat at night, right? So
right. So it's But I think the idea of giving yourself a good break between your say 6, 7 p.m. and then don't eat again until 8 in the next morning kind of thing, that's been shown to have quite a good effect on general health.
Skipping breakfast damages metabolism.
I think skipping breakfast is probably not good for you. Everything reads have a breakfast, and you really should, because it basically sets your circadian rhythm. It says, okay, the day is starting, and I'm going to eat. You wake up, you're hungry, kind of thing. So you probably should have a breakfast. All the health books say you should eat a good breakfast. So skipping it's probably not good. It fools your body into, why am I awake and not eating until noon, for example? That's not what we should be doing. So. It's probably not good for you, but not my area.
And another thing that everybody talks about, everyone should take multivitamins daily.
No, that's being debunked. I was just reading again a book last night about all the data on vitamins, and no, there's no good data to say that vitamins actually improve anything. They don't hurt you, but if you're eating a healthy, balanced diet, you don't need vitamins. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, but that said, there's no scientific evidence. If you're malnourished or something, of course, or your you need an iron supplement, women especially, that's fine. But don't take vitamins to think that, well, if I take a vitamin, I can eat McDonald's foods 24/7. It's going to fix everything. It doesn't work that way. Eat a healthy, balanced diet. And generally speaking, the average person does not need vitamins. There's no data to show they actually help. Yeah.
So we move to the last section, which is the fun questions. So if microbes were characters in a movie, which ones would be the heroes and which one would be the villains?
Oh, that's great. That sort of goes back to our good microbe, bad microbe, and who are they? And I think actually microbes would be really good movie characters, because they can be good or bad depending on what they are. And you can be cheering for this microbe like crazy, and suddenly they turn on you and they kill you, kind of thing. So they're very complex characters, I think, in that sense. So, I mean, generally speaking, we tend to think that those cause infections are bad, the salmonellas and the pathogenic E. coli's and stuff, and the ones that are good are good for us and just sort of hang out and do there. But it's a little more complex than that. And I think if you got into the movie's plots a little more, I think microbes would be great characters.
So would you, like, if you had no access to any phone or book or anything, how many microbes would you be able to write
You mean the names of them?
the names? I don't know.
I would guess probably close to 100.
100.
But there's thousands out there. Many of them, you don't even recognize these names. And the problem is microbiologists constantly rename them. It's time to rename this thing. It used to call it Salmonella typhimurium. Now we call it Salmonella enterica, subspecies typhimurium. Well, what's the difference? There's another name kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of microbial names. They drive me crazy. I remember my very first micro courses. Do I have to really learn all these silly, long, crazy names that don't mean anything? And the microbiologist teacher said, well, of course you do. It's microbiology. But
Is there a method to the madness or not?
no. The trick is to get a microbe named after you, right? Or rename one after you. Yeah.
So what is the most weirdest or surprising thing you've learned about bacteria in your career?
I think it's just I think it's the whole microbiome field. So I grew up in a world where there was pathogens that caused disease, and there's normal flora which just didn't do anything. We didn't really know anything about it. It was in the gut, whatever. There's just bugs everywhere, and we don't know what they do. And then to realize that, if you take the top 10 reasons why you're going to die, 9 of those 10 reasons now have microbial links, whereas only one is actually microbial disease, and that's number 8, pneumonia. That to me is stunning that a microbe can affect cardiovascular disease, can affect obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, IBD. We never saw this coming as microbiologists, and it's great if you're a microbiologist because it's opened up the entire world of medicine. I think this is probably the most exciting area of medicine there is right now, and so that's probably the most surprising thing.
That's great. I'm sure there won't be one answer, but anyway, if you had to keep just one super microbe as a pet for good health, which one would you choose and why?
I'm not sure you could because, I mean, there is no one. So I would obviously tend to want to have the microbes that eat fiber and produce these short-chain fatty acids called butyrate that we know they're anti-inflammatory. Those are the good ones. But we know that, and I've been working with a company, Vedanta, that adds these microbes back to people, that you have to add 8 of these things to get an effect. You can't add 7. You cannot cut it down. And they have another area going on. They found a mixture of microbes get rid of multi-resistant E. coli and Klebsiella. So that's a drug resistant, and you want to get rid of them. They have a mixture of 48 microbes. If you take 47, doesn't matter which 47, it doesn't work. You have to add the entire ecosystem. So I think the concept that there's one microbe, I don't think you can do that. And when you look at all the clinical trials, they're all mixtures of microbes now because they're can't just add one. There is no one that does everything. Yeah. So unless you're going to genetically engineer a microbe to do all these things, you have this one super bug. Right now, you got to take mixes. So I don't think you could choose one. But if I did, it'd be one that would make short-chain fatty acids, just help my gut, anti-inflammatory type activities.
Right. Do you ever find yourself thinking of microbes when you're eating food? Can you really switch off the scientist in you?
No, I'm a scientist. I think everything I do is related to microbes. It's just on your brain all the time. Every time I shake hands with someone, I'm thinking, goodness gracious, what are they doing to me? Because I love kissing people. Like in France, they kiss them on 2 cheeks. I think, well, how many microbes do we just swap there? And things like that. And social. I wanted to do an experiment on our UBC president who shakes hands with every graduate. So he's just shaken 3,000 hands. And I asked him, can I swab your hand before and after? You're shaking it 3,000 times. What kind of microbes do you have on your skin, kind of thing? No, I think about it all the time. It's the way I am. I know I'm weird, but it just is. Yeah.
Okay. Last 2 questions. Which is your favorite book, other than the ones you've written?
Oh, I think Bill Dyson's name, The History of Nearly Everything. So
I like that
this
too.
is a really neat book where he goes through all the major scientific discoveries in the world and how they got there. And it's really fun because you realize it's often people that aren't in the field that actually solve the problem. Because people in the field have been all thinking the same way, and then someone walks in from a completely different field and blows it open, they see it differently, and they solve the problem. And interesting problems like how much does the Earth weigh? Well, how do you figure that out, right? And so yeah, that's probably my favorite book.
Okay. Of all the prizes and awards that you've got so far, which one's your favorite?
I'm going to say two, if I can, because I think the first one is Order of Canada. So that's Canada's highest prize. If it was in Britain, you'd be called Sir. I'd love to be called Sir Brett, but I don't live in Britain. So that's, and the people that win this are just amazing people. And then another one I just won a few months ago, I'm very proud of. It's a mentorship award. So it's for training people. And I have trained now over 100 postdocs that are actually in jobs around the world at universities and things. And it's kind of like a proud father, these are my scientific kids in a sense. And the joy you get when your own kid goes on to succeed. And, when you get many of these people, and they're department heads, deans, and they're running the science world in their own way. And I think you contribute to that. I'm very proud of that. So I guess those would be the two I'd put.
That's great. So Brett, is there anything that I missed out or a message that you want to give the viewers?
Well, yeah, I guess the strongest message would be rethink the world through a microbiology lens, and everything you do, realize these microbes are part of it. And if you incorporate that into your thinking, I think it can actually just help you live a much more healthy, productive life, because that's how we evolved. We know there's microbes there and it's normal. And so embrace that and live with it.
So let them eat dirt and
Let them eat dirt. Yep.
That is your key to your microbiome.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I think that was absolutely fantastic. As always, I think it's always fun to talk to you. I think you're always full of so many ideas and solutions. So no wonder you can't turn off the scientist in you.
Well, thank you, Anna. That's great.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.